A fisherman once dreamed of a woman standing on water, telling him to find the shape of a heart hidden somewhere in the islands of Palawan. And when he finally found it, when he finally stepped onto that heart-shaped island, no one could have predicted that decades later, it would become one of the most quietly unsettling ruins in the entire Philippines. A luxury retreat with marble floors and ocean view balconies that today stands roofless, gutted, and swallowed by vines. And almost nobody agrees on why. The island is called Matinloc, tucked inside the Bacuit Archipelago near El Nido in northern Palawan. And if you have ever taken an island hopping tour through this part of the country, there is a good chance your boat has already docked at its narrow concrete pier. Without your guide ever explaining what actually happened here, most visitors are told to admire the view from the cliff top, snap a few photos, and move on to the next lagoon. But behind that view sits a story that locals still argue about. One involving a wealthy family, a religious order, allegations of illegal construction, a sudden and unexplained halt, and a slow public unraveling that turned a private paradise into a place people now describe as haunted. To understand how a project this ambitious could simply stop, you have to go back to the late 20th century, when El Nido was nowhere near the international tourist name it is today. Palawan back then was still considered the wild edge of the Philippines, a province of dense forest, scattered fishing villages, and islands that had barely seen outside development. Into that setting came a devout and affluent family from El Nido town, determined to build something extraordinary on Matinloc. A combination of private residence, religious sanctuary, and retreat house that would double as a spiritual landmark for the entire region. Construction reportedly began in the early 1980s. Workers cleared space along the island's western shore, beneath towering limestone cliffs that rise straight out of the turquoise water, and began raising a dome-shaped shrine dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary, along with an adjoining mansion meant to house both the family and a small community of nuns. It was an enormous undertaking for its time and location, requiring materials to be shipped in by boat. And it quickly became the subject of local fascination, since nothing on this scale had been attempted on such a remote island before. For a while, it worked exactly as intended. The retreat house filled with religious residents who lived a quiet, almost monastic life on the island, supplied only once a month by boat from the mainland. Every year, in late May, hundreds of vessels from El Nido and surrounding villages would sail out to Matinloc for a fluvial procession honoring what became known as Our Lady of Matinloc, turning the isolated island into a temporary floating festival. For a brief window, this was not an abandoned ruin. It was a functioning, celebrated piece of Palawan's religious life. And then, without a clear announcement or a single agreed-upon explanation, it stopped. This is where the story becomes genuinely strange. Because unlike most abandoned buildings that have a single traceable cause, Matinloc has at least 4 competing explanations.
And every long-term resident of El Nido seems to believe a different one.
The first and most commonly repeated version is that the family and the company behind the project ran into overwhelming financial trouble. Maintaining a fully staffed retreat house on a remote island with no roads, no power grid, and no easy supply chain was extraordinarily expensive. And at some point, the money to sustain it simply ran out, leaving construction frozen mid-progress. The second explanation, and arguably the most consequential one, involves environmental law. According to several tour guides and residents interviewed over the years, authorities discovered that the retreat house had been built without proper environmental clearance in a protected coastal zone. Since Matinloc sits within what later became part of the Bacuit Bay Marine Reserve system. If true, this would mean the very existence of the mansion violated regulations meant to protect Palawan's fragile coastline, and that the project was effectively shut down from the outside, rather than abandoned by choice. The third version is far more personal. Some islanders claim the family behind the retreat eventually separated, and that ownership of the land passed to one party, while the other left the country entirely, taking with them any motivation or resources to keep the project alive. Under this telling, Matinloc is less a story about zoning violations and more a story about a marriage that quietly fell apart on the other side of the world, leaving an unfinished sanctuary behind as collateral. And then there is the fourth version, the one tour guides tell almost reluctantly, usually after a pause, about hidden wartime treasure, supposedly buried somewhere on the island, with rumors suggesting the shrine and mansion were built partly as cover for a search. What almost everyone agrees on, regardless of which version they believe, is what happened after the abandonment. Once construction stopped and the retreat house emptied out, the island had no regular caretaker presence strong enough to protect it. Furniture, fixtures, and anything that could be carried onto a small outrigger boat was gradually taken piece by piece over the years that followed. Only the heaviest items remained. Water tanks too large to move, toilet fixtures cemented into the floor, debris too broken to be worth stealing. What tourists walk through today is essentially the skeleton of what was left, after everything portable had already disappeared. Inside what locals call the mini museum, a small room near the entrance once displayed photographs and newspaper clippings, and the miracles pilgrims attributed to it over the years. Visitors who came in the 2010s described that room as increasingly bare, its display cases picked apart, its photographs faded or missing entirely. A quiet second layer of decay happening to the island's own attempt at explaining itself. Even the memory of Matinloc was eroding along with its walls. By the time El Nido exploded into one of the most photographed destinations in Southeast Asia, Matinloc had already completed its transformation from private sanctuary to public curiosity. Tour operators began including it as a stop on island hopping routes, charging a modest entrance fee, even though there was no formal upkeep, no lighting, and no structured tour of the ruins themselves. Matinloc is far from the only place in Palawan where ambition outpaced regulation, or where a luxury development met a sudden, contested end. Just north, in the waters off Kulian, an entire island called Naglayan was developed into a resort, built with imported white sand poured over what used to be mangrove forest, using timber that investigators later linked to illegal logging. Palawan's coastline is dotted with these half-finished cautionary tales, places where the line between paradise and violation blurred. Just enough for something extraordinary to rise, and then, just as quickly, be forced to stop. Today, the island continues to sit exactly where that fisherman supposedly found it, heart-shaped and half-wild. Still charging 100 pesos at the door for anyone curious enough to climb through what remains. And Matinloc, sitting quietly between paradise and ruin, seems determined to keep it that way.